It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
We made this.
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to We Are Starfleet. Before we get started on our coverage for this episode 204 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Among the Lotus Eaters, I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. Towards the end of the episode, one of my neighbors started mowing the lawn, and when I did noise reduction to try to edit that out, apparently it makes me sound like I am inside a glass bottle. Because unfortunately, it was pretty close to the window where my office is. So I do apologize for that. But fortunately, Clara and Craig were doing most of the talking then, so you don't have to hear it too much. But anyway, just wanted to give a little bit of disclaimer of why I sound a little odd towards the end of the episode, but everything else should be okay. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in just a bit. So for now, hit it. Hello and welcome to We Are Starfleet, a Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds podcast on the We Made This podcast network. I'm your host, Ashley Thomas, in the captain's chair today, and my number one is here with me, Craig McKenzie. And we are here to continue our coverage of the second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, discussing episode 204, Among the Lotus Eaters. This episode is written by Kirsten Beyer and Davy Perez, and directed by Eduardo Sanchez. In this episode, returning to a planet that dredges up tragic memories, Captain Pike and his landing party find themselves forgetting everything, including their own identities, as he confronts a ghost from his past. Our guest to discuss the episode is fellow We Made This podcaster, Clara Cook. Hello, Clara.
Hi, Ashley. How are you today?
Hi. Good, thanks. How you doing, friend?
I'm good. I feel ready to remember this episode. I'm not going to forget it.
Yeah, I hope I remember everything that we're supposed to talk about as well. Craig, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. I've recently been exercising, so I'm in a bit of pain, but no pain, no gain, according to some.
Yeah, I hear that's how it works. Yeah. I just finished lunch, so and I'm drinking coffee, so definitely not exercising. Very cool. Thank you both for joining me today. Clara, is this your first time?
I think it is, yeah. I think it is. It's not the first time I've ever podcasted about Star Trek, but I think it's the first time I've ever podcasted about Star Trek on the We Made This network. And it's definitely the first time I've ever been on this show.
That is awesome. Cool. Well, I'm so glad that you're on here with us today. For those who may not know you, Clara, can you tell us very briefly, like, just your history with Star Trek?
Yeah, sure. So I first started watching Star Trek when I was about 4 years old, and I was watching the original series, not when it first aired. I'm not that old. It was obviously reruns when I was first watching it, and I just loved it. And then I really got heavily into it, I think, when I watched the movies, the original series movies, so, like The Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock and, The Voyage Home. When I watched all of those, probably around about 7 or 8, and then just it was a love affair. Took off from there. I watched Next Generation. There was a thing that I'm sure Craig can tell you that in the UK, the Next Generation was shown on BBC Two, which is a BBC channel, on Wednesday evenings. So people would come home from school and they'd watch Simpsons, and then they'd watch Star Trek Next Generation. And so throughout my school days, I watched that. And then Deep Space Nine first aired, and I was probably just about to become a teenager, and that was really exciting. And then as I grew up to be an adult, I didn't really know many people who watched Star Trek when I was an adult, when I was young, really young, but I happened to go to a Star Trek convention in Birmingham, Destination Star Trek it was called, many, many years ago, and that's how I met the founder of the We Made This podcast network, Tony, and we just started talking, and through him, I met another person called Duncan Barrett, who I ended up hosting a Star Trek podcast with. And then I just exploded from there, and I started to meet so many other people online and in person who all love Star Trek. And I found a really lovely community out there of people who love the same show and love the franchise and want to talk about it and are just really lovely and nice and enthusiastic.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Coming home from school and you getting to watch Next Gen and The Simpsons, that sounds like a great afternoon.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
There was often a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode sitting between them as well.
Oh,
yeah, that's
okay.
true, yeah.
Hey, that's still a pretty good afternoon, I was watching Power Rangers, which, I still enjoyed very much, but...
It was more evening than afternoon.
Gotcha.
After dinner time.
Yeah, it's like 6 p.m. or 6:30 or something, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, fun. Why don't we talk a little bit, just get some overall thoughts on Strange New Worlds Season 2 thus far. Craig, we've got 4 episodes now. How are you feeling about Season 2?
I think it's largely an improvement on Season 1. They're finding more of a groove than they had in Season 1. I feel like there was a lot of trial and error in the first season to figure out how to do episodic storytelling again, because it's a bit of a lost art, really, certainly in franchise media. So didn't always hit the mark, but this season it's a lot better. Let's say that. Yes, it's a lot better than the first season because they feel like they've got a bit of a grasp on it. And I think the episodes so far have been, by and large, a bit more interesting than what early Season 1 was doing as well. So I'm really on board with this season so far. The second episode with the trial was interesting. The alternate Kirk La'an time travel episode was really fun as well. So yeah, I'm into the season so far.
Yeah, very good. Clara, how about you?
I've really loved this second season so far. I have to say that I feel like the series is starting to move away from sort of winking and sort of nudging like fan service. Not that it was doing it all the time in Season 1, but it's like there's less like, do you remember this character from the original series, don't you? You remember this, thing from Discovery? Yeah, we have it here too. It's less like that, and it's more like they're letting these characters fully become characters in their own right.
Baby Khan notwithstanding.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Apart from that. So, it seems a lot more like the characters themselves are starting to be fleshed out and being developed kind of, I would say, quite well. And yeah, the second episode, I think, in Season 2, I can't remember, Per Ad Astra? Mm-hmm. Is that what? I don't think that's quite how it's actually said.
Close enough. I would have to go back and look. I don't remember offhand myself.
To the stars through struggle, right, is what it means. I thought that was probably one of the finest episodes of Star Trek that I'd seen in a long time. It's classic Star Trek posing a question, a difficult question, asking us to think about our morality, asking us to think about our laws and our society, and asking people to appeal to the angels of their better nature when making a very serious decision. And I thought that was sort of reminiscent to me of some of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, where they have this sort of problem or question that they've got to sort of discuss both practically but also theoretically. And I thought that was really, really well done.
I'm really enjoying everything thus far. I have been waiting for today's particular episode, Among the Lotus Eaters, for, since Star Trek Day 2022, because they played a quick clip of it, because I am very much pro #Mortegas, and apparently that has been a pretty large fan outcry, because she was one of the only bridge characters that didn't kind of get her own focus episode last season, and so they teased us a little bit with this one, playing her personal log and then getting denied on going on the away mission. So I have been waiting for this for quite a while, but we'll dig into that just a little bit. But overall, I'm having a blast this season. I watched episode 2 again last night, just thinking through like, wow, there's a lot more to unpack here than I thought. Even though I already knew it was kind of a weighty episode, but was still unpacking more of it the more I watched it. And same with episode 3 as well. I think there's a lot of really interesting storytelling that they're doing there. But overall, I'm having a really great time this season. I'm definitely looking forward to more. So, but anyway, let's dig in specifically to our discussion on Among the Lotus Eaters. So, Clara, how would you rate this episode out of 10?
I would probably rate this episode... Oh, that's tough. I don't know. Let me think. I think I'd probably rate it around about 8 out of 10. Yeah, I would rate it about 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't immediately see where things were going, or I couldn't figure out exactly what was going to happen in the end. And there's just some beautiful bits of dialogue. Some beautiful, like, I wrote down quotes, beautiful lines of dialogue that are just classic lines of dialogue that you could see in a quote book, a Star Trek quote book in the future. And I also love how it sort of has this overarching kind of theme of that is actually you do see time and time again in Star Trek, but done in different ways, about what makes us who we are, and about sort of owning the struggle of your past, owning, sort of your pain and your memories, and that's kind of what makes you who you are, as well as all the good things that you remember and all the good things that have happened to you. I also just wanted to say that I loved the title of it, because I love how it harks back to what they used to do a lot of the original series, which is that they used to have titles, and actually they've done it with other series too, but a lot of the original series where they title an episode, link it to something else, like Who Mourns for Adonis or Memento Mori or something like that. But in this it harks back to something that's classical. So the Lotus Eaters was a story in the Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus and his crew of men who are trying to get back to Ithaca after the War of Troy encounter an island that is populated by a population of people, the Lotus Eaters, who eat the lotus plant so that they can just forget and live in blissful forgetfulness. And Odysseus' men eat the lotus plant, and they basically soon become so forgetful and happy that they forget about going home. And Odysseus has to then basically rescue them and be like, look, we're on a mission to get back to Ithaca, to get back to our home. And, we can't just spend the rest of our lives living here in sort of ignorance, forgetting our families and our loved ones and, all the people waiting for us back at home. So I liked that the writers of the episode had linked it to this story mythology, specifically in the Odyssey, which I thought was really cool.
Very cool. And thank you for making that connection. I looked at the title, I was like, I know that is something literary that I have probably read, but I could not remember for the life of me what it was. So thank you for putting that in. I appreciate that. Craig, how about you? How would you rate this episode, and any general thoughts that you have?
I'm hovering around a 7. I think it's good, and I think it has some good things in it, but there's also some major pacing issues in the middle part of it. I feel like it gets a bit dragged down and a bit repetitive, and it sort of loses itself in terms of its messaging a little bit, which we'll obviously get into. I do think it had some really good moments in it, and there was some really good character stuff. I like the way they play with memory and how important certain things are, or what we attach to objects, how they make us think of things and so on. It's very original series as well. The memory loss gimmick is very original series. We're on a planet and we're losing our memory. Why? And obviously the Prime Directive accidentally or otherwise broken to mess with a society. There is a lot of original series stuff that does that. So yeah, it's good. I thought it was a good episode.
I'm kind of in between with you guys. I'm 7.5, I think. And for those same reasons, Craig, I felt like there was maybe some pacing issues. I kind of felt like I couldn't decide which was the A plot, which was the B plot.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Because, and maybe it's because I went in thinking, oh, we're finally getting an Ortegas episode. And in some ways we did. But I was hoping to get more of her personal story and more of her history. And instead, the only thing I know about her is I'm Eric Ortegas and I fly the ship. And I was like, well, I already knew that.
In an episode that's about her being a bit fed up of flying the ship as well, you'd think it would be about let's explore what else she is, rather than let's double down on her fully committing to that, which is a good affirmation, but also there's got to be more to her, right? And maybe that's what the episode should have been getting at, as in, what do these people do beyond the station that they sit at? Because that's something that Star Trek has struggled with certain characters in the past as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely agree with that assessment. But overall, I still had a good time. I think some of the concepts that we're exploring, like in relation to memory, is they're all really interesting to me. I have some, kind of personal connection with memory and lack thereof with some folks in my family, and so I think this is definitely worth digging into. So let's dive in. Clara, I'm going to start with you. Tell me what worked for you in this episode. What are you like, man, yes, I love that hit it out of the park.
I think what worked for me, one of the things that really worked for me was the idea that they leave behind a crew member by accident, and that crew member then becomes like the king of the planet. I think that's something that is very original series. It's this idea that, I guess, power can corrupt people, and also that Starfleet officers can be corrupted by being in, I guess, more primitive situations. So one of the things I thought that was quite amusing, and I also thought it sort of fit in with the original series kind of theme. I also like the idea of the Enterprise going back to clean up their mess. The idea of going back to a planet where the Enterprise broke the Prime Directive and then having to sort it out. Because what you see often in throughout the franchise is the variety of different crews breaking the Prime Directive again and again and again. I mean, it's the Prime Directive, right? But it's basically broken more than almost any other rule in Star Trek. But you don't always see what happens right after that. Like what are the after effects? There are a few stories like that, but I felt like in this one was really showing that they have to go back, and it's not just a matter of like, oh, these aliens have seen the Enterprise. It's like these aliens now actually have phaser rifles. They have weapons, so we have to go back. I like the idea of them forgetting who they were, but trying to struggle to remember who they were, and the idea of, I thought the acting was really good. So they went from being these competent, confident, highly trained Starfleet officers to being just bewildered sitting in a cage, not really trusting each other or trusting themselves, until they started to get a feel for the fact that they felt they somehow knew each other. And I liked all the stuff with Ortegas, I have to say. I really liked that she is the navigator and the pilot of the ship, and at one point she's asking the computer of the Enterprise to direct her to her quarters because she's lost. I thought that was kind of a funny little ironic twist. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with you guys. There was some pacing problems in the middle of it, definitely. But I think in terms of a lot of the other episodes of Star Trek that I've watched in recent years, I would say I actually don't think this is not one of the worst ones I've watched. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there was a lot of stuff that I liked about it. And I think one of the things I thought was a bit silly was the idea that Starfleet finds out the Prime Directive has been broken by the fact that the inhabitants of this planet have sculpted the delta out of a hedge in a garden. Do you know what I mean? That was I thought that was pretty funny, But anyway,
Craig, how about you?
There was a lot of things that worked for me. I really liked that the characters went back to their foundational traits when they lost their memory. So Pike was a leader, La'an was a warrior, and Becca was a healer. Ortegas less so. She was sort of scared, which suggests that she might be underneath it all, underneath her bravado, she might be a very scared and anxious person. Spock just becomes a bit useless without his memories. He just stands around and waits for something to happen, which I thought was quite funny. It seems that his default is wait for it all to blow over. I don't know. That's very strange. But I like those things about it. I like the idea of Pike's, the compass, I think it is, that Batel gives him. And that represents their relationship, and it's a powerful object for him that kind of keeps him sane. The idea of the corrupted Starfleet officer was something that really worked for me. And I liked Pike's simple speech to him at the end. It's like, I'm really sorry we left you behind, but you can't blame me for all the stuff you did after that. That's all you. And he just goes back to face judgment. I like that. So, yeah, and there was quite a few things I liked. The visual effects of the piloting through the asteroid field, that was cool as well, just from a spectacle point of view.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what y'all have said. I think for me, the whole memory loss storyline played well. The very short version is my brother-in-law has a traumatic brain injury and has had one his entire life due to a diabetic coma he had as a toddler, and therefore he has short-term memory loss. And so this idea of we have these totems and items and things like that that help us define who we are and shape who you are, just very meaningful to me, because he has a really good eye for photography, and he takes a lot of pictures because that's how he remembers things. And so all of that just really set well with me. I was also reminded a little bit of the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I don't know if either of you have seen that one.
Yeah.
So that a little different, but it's the same concept of I'm choosing to forget this because it's painful, and yet it's these memories that are kind of shaping who I am as a person. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I also like this idea of positive mantras and self-talk. So the refrain that Erica repeats throughout the entire episode, I'm Erica Ortegas and I pilot the ship. Yeah, I mean, she even says that, even in her personal log, I'm Erica Ortegas and I'm the pilot for the Starship Enterprise. And she, she's very much, she wants to be in the fray, but there's such a thing as being too good at your job. And so sometimes you don't get to do the things you want to do. And yet that ends up being the most important thing in the world by the end of the episode. So there's some interesting discussion there about, doing your job well. And this whole idea of what's the stuff that really gets in your mind, in your memory, in your brain when you can't even remember your own name. Kind of an interesting example of that. I am from the South in the United States, and even though I don't necessarily have much of an affinity for country music, I have a good friend that works in it, and I don't know if either of you are familiar with the country star, Glenn Campbell, the Rhinestone Cowboy.
I know the song.
Yeah. So Glenn Campbell, he passed away a few years ago, but he had Alzheimer's or dementia at the end, and couldn't remember his own name, couldn't speak very much, but my friend told me that his daughter said if you put a guitar in his hand, he could still play guitar. And he could play the songs that he wrote, from front to back. But, he couldn't speak very much. He didn't know who anybody was. And so I just thought that was so fascinating about, what's the thing that you do that kind of defines you in some ways? I don't even like to use the phrase define, but what's something that you've worked your whole life at, to be good at, to excel and succeed at? And, for Glenn Campbell, he was a singer and performer, so he played guitar. And that was the one thing he could still do at the end, even when he couldn't do anything else. And so I love this idea of, by the end, Erica barely knows her own name. She has to repeat, her own name and her job to herself as she's marching back to the bridge. I'm Erica Ortegas and I pilot the ship. And as soon as she sits down in that chair, she's like, I feel like I can do this. And she does it because this is the thing that she is the best at. And that is ingrained in her, even though she can barely remember her own name. I think it's fascinating. It's a really neat idea. So all of that just really worked well for me. I think it says something about how we as humans define ourselves. People define themselves in lots of different ways. And for some people, it's the work. For some people, it's their family or friends. And, in Star Trek, at least, it seems it's in some ways it's defined by the job that you do or the thing that you're good at.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do agree with you to a certain extent that I think maybe Craig said this, that the episode does kind of confuse some of these messages about memory and about identity. And actually, you're right. This very strongly came through about how people's identities in Starfleet, at least in this episode, are very much affected by what job they do. I guess what vocation. It really is like a calling, isn't it, for Erica, that she's an exceptional pilot. This is a talent of hers, not just a job. It's a calling. And, she does go say at the very end, doesn't she say, when you do something every day, you forget how amazing it is. And actually, it turns out what she is doing every day is amazing, but because she's so used to it, it's routine. At the beginning of the episode, she's sort of finding it a bit boring. But I agree with Craig as well, where they sort of mix some of the stuff up, because it's sort of implied that you can lose your memory, but still retain some of your identity through skills that you can still retain, like playing guitar or flying a starship, but also through emotion. So one of the reasons why Pike is compelled to go into the castle and find the supposed, mythical box of memories is because he really feels that he's supposed to protect Lan, and he's supposed to help M'Benga basically get his memory back, to find the knowledge in order to save her life. And that's an emotion. And so there's certain parts of it, like, where Spock says emotions are not facts. I mean, this is something that you'll hear again and again in psychology, is emotions are not facts. Especially, this is how they treat people who have some sort of mental illness or like depression. Emotions are not facts. Thoughts are not facts. Like, that's something that you hear a lot of the time if you have anxiety. Thoughts are not facts. But the episode's also saying, like, trust your emotions. They define who you are. But yet the guy that they meet on the planet says to them, it's great that we've lost our memories. The forgetting means that we can just feel our emotions and we don't have to have our memories, but yet the emotions are what drives Pike and M'Benga and Lan to actually find out what's going on. And there's just some conflicting messages there. I think one of the things that I thought was interesting was that really sort of reminded me of, I know I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Star Trek The Final Frontier, the movie?
Yes, I just watched that for the first time in a long time yesterday, and definitely has crossed my mind.
Yeah, I know people hate it when I bring up this movie, because it's not as everybody's favourites, but there's that message throughout the movie, with Cyborg trying to take away people's pain, and Kirk sort of saying, like, no, don't take my pain away, because it defines who I am, it makes me who I am. And I felt a little bit like that was also kind of tying in with this as well. Like, the man that they meet on the planet who's trying to help them, he sort of makes out that the forgetting is a good thing, like, you don't have to ever relive any of your worst moments, the terrible memories that you have. He knows that he might have possibly had a family that he's lost, he doesn't want to remember. But it's not said sort of explicitly, but it's like the idea is that, like, well, actually, no, it is, actually, because Lan says at the very end, doesn't she say, maybe some memories are worth the pain of others? So it is kind of explained explicitly, I suppose, that, like, actually it's important to have the good memories, but it's also really important to have the bad memories. It's important to remember the pain and to feel the pain of the past, and because that also helps to define who you are as a person. So then it's like, is it your thoughts? Is it your job? Is it your emotion? I mean, they're kind of mixing a lot in, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it didn't seem to land 100% on any one of those things that you mentioned. It's definitely a little confusing, and I think there's also, like, this very, I mean, you all tell me if it's like that across the pond, but it's a very American-centric idea of, you're at a party, you don't know anyone, you say, oh, my name is blah, 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 what do you do? And so, in some ways, Americans tend to define themselves by the work that they do, and I don't know, I don't necessarily like that. I
think that happens over here too, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's a very Western thing.
One of the first questions you'll ask someone is, so what do you do? Yeah, and you expect them to tell you what it is they do for a living, and then you form an opinion of some sort based on that, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't like that. I would rather, so personally, I mean, this maybe it's just a me thing, but when I introduce people to other people at, like, a party or whatever, I try to say something about them as a human, like, so-and-so, these are some of my oldest friends, or we bonded over our love for Star Trek, or whatever. So you have, like, a context for that person. You're more than just the job that you do, because not everybody has the good fortune to really enjoy their work. and have like an amazing job, like being the pilot of the Starship Enterprise. So,
which in itself can be boring, apparently.
Yeah, apparently so. Which, I mean,
You have to imagine our day-to-day is just setting courses and pressing warp.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
That'll be most of her job.
yeah,
And then sitting there until they arrive, and then she can do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure that don't hit any stray asteroids on the way. But you're right. I don't feel like this episode nails on any one of those things 100%. So maybe perhaps the moral meaning message is we're defined by all of these things, not necessarily just one of them. They're all, whether we're defined by them or not, they're all an integral part of our lives, and that's something important. So interesting thoughts there.
I do wonder if they could have made better use of La'an in this scenario, because we know that her past is very traumatic. Her memories of her childhood and so on really drag her down. They stop her from relating to people. They impact her relationships. They impact every part of her life. In this situation, it would have been interesting perhaps if she'd just become this bubbling, positive person, the complete opposite of what she is normally, because she isn't inhibited by those memories. And then I suppose she could be the one that brings forth the lesson of, oh no, it turns out we need those memories to round us out as people, because otherwise this bliss is false. It's not real. It's manufactured by the fact that I can't remember the things that I've been through. And it's the happiness by contrast, isn't it? You can only be really happy if you know what it's like to be sad. Anything else, it's just, so effectively you take a drug and it makes you feel a certain way for a little while, but it's not real because you don't understand the contrast. So kind of missed a trick with La'an. She was the ideal person to do that, I think.
Also, there's a bit of a problem with Pike in this episode, which is, so he knows he's going to have this life-changing accident or possibly die, right? And he must have forgotten about that while he's on the planet.
You'd imagine so, yeah.
And so suddenly remembering that, isn't that going to be a bit of a blow? And I think also the fact that they included this stuff with Captain Patel in the beginning. So they made the sort of focus of him remembering himself and, kind of feeling kind of connected to an emotion to the pendant that she gave him, right? But they also have these two other characters, like you said, Lan and Mbenga there, who both, we've been told in previous episodes, have traumatic pasts. Like Mbenga's had this sort of traumatic experience from war. I think they implied he actually has PTSD. And they didn't exploit either of those, but instead they're going to use Pike's relationship with this captain. That, are we really emotionally invested in that at this point? I'm not saying that I don't like Captain Patel and that I don't think she wouldn't be a nice partner for him. And it was kind of interesting to see how it's hard for captains of ships to form romantic relationships because they're so in demand in terms of work. And that's something that we have seen in other series as well, right? Picard always struggled with his romantic life. And Kirk, in the original series is I've got one mistress and her name is the Enterprise, or whatever he says. So you can see that's a running theme. But is he so deeply in love with her that he would, I don't know. I was like, oh, we're doing this. We're doing his romantic feelings about his emotions about the pendant is what we're going to be focusing on, not Mbenga's. Because I thought they were going to do something to do with Mbenga's past or memories or whatever. Because at the beginning of the episode, he's kind of disgruntled that he's been chosen to go on the mission because of his combat skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like there are a few different characters they really could have zeroed in on and made it a little more interesting. Something I really hope that we learn more about this season. Melissa Navia, who plays Erica Ortegas, has said in interviews that Ortegas has, kind of a difficult past. Yeah, She's kind of snarky and she's fun, but it's kind of how she copes. She's lost people, she's a war veteran. So there's stuff in her past that we've not even touched yet that obviously Melissa knows about. So I'm really hoping that we get more of that this season, but I felt like there are so many other characters you could have zeroed in on, because I was just under the impression that Captain Battelle was kind of Pike's booty call, because obviously he goes and has a fling with what's her name in episode 6 last season, so who's somebody he had a relationship with before, and he didn't think he was going to see her again. So it's really difficult to kind of, unless they just decided in somewhat recently that they want to make this more serious. All that happened off screen and is not really conveyed to us that much.
Well, that's Pike's eventual revelation when it comes to the end of the episode, where he does decide to commit to her. Although from his point of view, he knows that he only has to do it for 9 years as opposed to a lifetime, because he knows what's going to happen to him. So there's that to think about. But I guess up until this point, it was very much we're both captains, we both have busy lives, we might not see each other for months or years at a time, and we get it. When we have time together, we'll have time together, and the rest of the time we won't think about it too much, whereas Pike seems to be wanting to take that next step. But it almost feels like he's only doing that because he annoyed her earlier in the episode when she's upset about her lack of promotion, and that's a consequence of episode 2, and he approaches it the wrong way. And I like that he approaches it the wrong way, because it's good to have characters that are flawed and don't react properly. And up until this point, we've seen Pike be the almost 80s leader, like your Optimus Prime, who's always right. Everything he says is usually right. And it was good to see him be fallible in that way, just not know the right thing to say in that moment, because that humanized him. Although I didn't really buy into his end conversation with Battelle, where he said, yeah, let's be a couple who see each other sometimes. I don't think that was quite earned, but it's almost the old school Trek trope of the revolving door soulmate type thing, as in we have this character who's here for one episode and that'll be the romance for that one episode. And granted, we have seen her before, but she's in this episode so that they can deal with that relationship in this episode, and then I imagine it'll be a very long time before it gets brought up again.
Yeah. Also, when he has that conversation with Una, and Una says, oh, you push people away. When you get scared, you push people away. And yes, that could be, he could be a bit of a commitment phobe. It's not unreasonable, considering, how busy and complicated his life is, being the leader of all these people, and responsible for all these lives on the starship. But he also could be pushing people away because he knows that no relationship, like you said, is going to be a long-term permanent thing, because he knows what's going to happen to him in the future. So when Una was like, you've done it again, I was like, well, actually, maybe this is actually kind of a reasonable thing to do. Like, do you want to start a long-term, serious, romantic relationship with somebody knowing full well that you've only really got, 9 years before you're hideously disfigured and stuck in a wheelchair? And he thinks he might end up dead, right? Does he know he's going to survive?
He knows he'll be in the chair, yeah, so he knows that he survives, because he referred to it last season as the death of the man he is now, rather than actually being dead. He doesn't know that he'll have a happy fantasy life on Talos 4, though.
Yeah, so with a different woman.
Right.
Well, she can be whoever he wants her to be, I suppose.
Which is also kind of dodgy, but yeah.
But he can also be whoever she wants him to be, so
that's true.
It balances itself out, I guess.
We're already kind of dancing around it. What didn't work for you guys? Craig, why don't you start? Just a lot
of the stuff I've said. I think it fails to fully commit to its messaging because it gets a bit confused with its messaging. It is a shame that I wouldn't even call this an Ortega-centric episode, because she's just one element as part of the jigsaw that makes up the episode. But it's the one where she's had the most to do, other than the one last season, which was also focused on the fact that they weren't themselves. So it seems like every Ortega's episode is she's not herself. She's either forgotten who she is or turned into someone else. It's a bit like every time Kirk turns up, he'll be from an alternate reality or an alternate timeline. They're playing with that almost. But yeah, so I was disappointed that we didn't learn more about Ortega's, because the whole point was her just relearning who we already know her to be. So that was a bit of a disappointment. And like I said, the wasting the opportunity to have La'an become a really positive person without her trauma weighing her down, and just that a lot of the stuff on the planet I thought was fairly weak. I think they really needed to do a lot more there.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I really was hoping for more actual backstory for Ortegas, but I do like that she actually got something exciting to do. Melissa is really funny, and even in like the small bits that she's had, even as like just in the background in other episodes, you give her a line and she nails it. And I think it was third episode last season where she's walking down the hallway and she sees the one guy trying to get more light, more sunlight or whatever, and she's like, "Whatever tweaks your freak, bro," and just keeps walking. Yeah, she's got like some fun banter to her, and I find that charming and endearing. So I really do hope we get more of her in this series this season. So Clara, what were some things that didn't work for you?
Yeah, there are a few things, but before I say that, I just want to mention that I think Melissa's physical acting is also really good. Mm-hmm. So she, we've seen a lot of helmsmen throughout the franchise, over the many, decades of Star Trek. And I felt like I really believed she was flying the ship, even more than a lot of the other helmsmen that I've seen. It's the way that it sounds crazy, but the way she's using her fingers on this like touch screen, and the way she was sort of like swaying as she was turning corners and stuff, which I'm sure she wouldn't actually have to do, but she's doing it herself. Do you know what I mean? Like, right. I'm sure the ship, like the actual inertial dampeners or whatever, would prevent her from flopping all over the place. But it's like she's almost like when she goes around a corner, her body goes around the corner as well.
It's like when you play a video game and you tilt the controller even though it does nothing.
Yeah, and you kind of, exactly. You're tilting the controller, you're tilting yourself, even though, yeah, you're right, it has no effect.
I also want to add, if you notice, Melissa is like me and not very tall. I think I identify so much with like girl with short hair, kind of sassy, not tall. Okay, we're gonna be friends. But she kind of leans forward. She kind of sits on the edge of her seat. And if you look closely, I think if she sat back in the seat, her feet would not reach the ground. So I also have this problem. And so I like her just leaning into it seems to really help, and just shows her like physicality and stuff into her performance as well. Just tacking on that note about her physical performance.
She needs to do a DSE assessment on her station, get in the proper chair so that she can be comfortable.
Yeah. Unless she likes the feel of her feet swinging in the breeze, but...
But she'll be down in sickbay for back problems constantly, you would imagine.
But yeah, so I think one of the things that I thought was a bit disappointed about was that we didn't find out more about Zach. And that Zach wasn't more involved in the story. We just know that he basically somehow made himself king on this on this planet. And we don't really find out much about Zach, or what happened to him when he was left. And I think there could have been more, Zach could have been explored more. And maybe his corruption could have been more emphasized, more explored. It's not kind of clear what he's doing in this castle. It just looks like he's kind of sitting there alone in this big empty hall with a whole bunch of guards guarding him. I mean, maybe we could have seen some people worship him or something. I don't know. I felt like they could have dealt more with him.
They could have given him an older looking uniform as well.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a really minor thing, but there's a few things. So I don't understand how Pike knows M'Benga is like really good at hand-to-hand combat. Like I sort of felt like they implied in the first episode of this season that maybe no one really knows that about him, but Nurse Chapel. And somehow Pike, they must have a security staff on the Enterprise, but instead Pike is choosing the Doctor because he somehow knows the Doctor is amazingly good at hand-to-hand combat. And is anybody going to ask why? Is that because maybe he's taking performance-enhancing drugs during warfare? I don't know. But also, this is really minor, but it bothered me. And it bothers me in so many Star Trek episodes. So when they're descending in the shuttlecraft, and Pike says, hold on, it's going to get a bit bumpy, shouldn't, M'Benga go and sit down and strap himself in? And I don't understand why officers of Starfleet think they can just stand when there's turbulence.
Well, I mean, you don't ever see any of the seats have seatbelts.
I know, and I don't get that. I feel that's one thing that really, one thing in Star Trek that really confuses me. I don't understand. No, wasn't there a movie where, one of the Star Trek movies where they got seatbelts? Was it Star Trek Generations?
It's Into Darkness, actually, when the Enterprise is tumbling into the atmosphere and it's going upside down and stuff. They strap them, they press, nanotech seatbelts appear.
Seatbelts, yeah. And they're going
and there's a deleted scene of Nemesis as well, where Picard's chair finally gets some kind of restraint.
I guess it must seem kind of silly. I don't know, kind of a bit ridiculous. Maybe it just doesn't seem very heroic for everyone to strap themselves in. But he could at least have gone and sat in a chair. It's going to get really bumpy, and he just sort of stands there and perches on the console and kind of holds on to nothing. And I know this is real nitpicking, but I laughed out loud when I saw him sort of wobble while standing on his feet as the shotcraft went down. I was like, just, Doctor, go sit down. Heal thyself, Doctor.
Two things you never see in Star Trek: seatbelts and headphones.
Yeah.
You always have people complaining about people listening to music. Did headphones not survive World War III? Did they get wiped out? Are they a forgotten technology?
Apparently so.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say. Your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
All right. One thing I kind of want to zero in on is positive mantras and self-talk. These folks have lost their memories. They can't remember what they're doing or why they're doing it or what they're even doing here. But this idea of, I have to tell myself, I am Eric Ortegas and I fly the ship. I'm Eric Ortegas and I fly the ship. And boy, does she fly the ship. But that's something that, I am not a counselor. I don't have a degree in counseling or psychology or anything like that. But I know that is a tool that helps people work through anxiety or low self-esteem. I think of Ted Lasso with Colin's mantra, I am a strong and capable man. I am not a piece of shit. Dr. Sharon's like, you don't need that last bit. So I feel like this is almost this idea of having a mantra and having that self-affirmation. I'm Ashley Thomas, and I am a strong and capable writer or podcaster or whatever. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, definitely, because there's also parts of the episode when they're on the planet where the man that helps them, I can't remember his character's name. Well, do we even find out his name?
There's the joke.
Don't remember.
Yeah, I also think, he can't remember his own name, can he? But
he has it tattooed in his arm, but I didn't catch it.
I couldn't read it. And he says, be in the moment with me. Be in this moment now. And I think that is also a technique that you use. I guess you'd call that mindfulness, but that's also a technique you can use when you're feeling particularly anxious or frightened of uncertainty or the unknown or something that you don't understand or don't know, is like, just take it 1 minute, 10 minutes, half an hour at a time. And I think what he's trying to say to them then when they're leaving that cage to go off and do slave labor is basically, be in the moment with me. Just focus on the moment now. Try not to be too disturbed. Obviously, that's hard if you've completely lost your memory and you don't know where you are, or who anyone else is. It's going to be a bit hard to sort of forget that. But that's also I would say, another sort of self-help technique. Do you know what I mean? Like a mantra or like positive affirmations, which is, I think, what you're sort of talking about is, I'm capable, I can fly this ship. This is who I am, I can fly this ship. Sort of a positive affirmation to sort of reassure yourself in a very scary or uncertain or unreassuring situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Any thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, I found it interesting that they focused on that, and it made sense to come from the guy that was experienced in doing this, although every day would be like the first time he did it. But it seems like there's something that's drummed into them to keep doing this, keep only focusing on the here and now, because the here and now is important and it's all you'll ever remember. And then they talk about the forgetting being this good thing and how everything's better afterwards. So it's about shedding baggage, I think, and I talked earlier about the falseness of that bliss that they feel just being unburdened by their memories. So I'm not sure that they dig into it as well as they could, though, because part of the problem of nobody remembering anything means that they can't really explore anything, because there's nothing that the characters can actually reflect on until later on. So every scene, it's like they learn a lesson in that scene, and then the lesson's forgotten in the next scene. So playing with memory loss is a is a problem. It almost feels like you need to have someone there that remembers everything as that contrast. Usually in the original series, it'd be Spock that wouldn't be affected because he's Vulcan. There's usually one character that's not affected, and it's weird that they didn't do that here.
Yeah, definitely added a different layer of challenge when nobody knows what they're doing.
Or like in Next Generation, they lose their memories, and then if you're Riker and Rolaren, you end up sleeping together. And then afterwards being really awkward about it. I don't know. I think that there could have been something at the end of this episode where the crew sort of reflected on what happened to them, or maybe reflected on Ortega's flying the ship when, almost all of them were incapacitated. And instead of having Pike, you make up with Captain Patel. I'm not sure we needed that scene, but we could have used something else at the end with the rest of the crew.
We could have given Ortegas a medal for saving her life or something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe that was just another day on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Well, that's why she's bored. She's doing all this amazing stuff and never gets any recognition.
And no one notices.
Yeah, for real. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we wrap up for today?
So Rigel 7 is the planet that the Enterprise was at immediately before the cage. And if you watch the cage, there's little background details that Gene Roddenberry wanted to put in. It's like Spock walks with a limp, for example. So the idea was that they'd just come from something that was really grueling and harrowing, and they were then in this other situation. It was to, I guess, give the pilot some size, the idea that they've been doing stuff before this, and dangerous stuff is routinely what they do. Although it's a shame that you didn't get the really big guy that Pike fights in the flashback in the cage. I think that was on Rigel 7.
Good catch.
Just some mooks with phasers or whatever. That was all.
I didn't remember any of that at all, actually. I didn't know. I completely didn't make that connection.
Craig is good for that.
It's one of those callbacks that isn't as offensive as some other ones, because it's not that the episode is hinging itself on that callback. It's just, even if you've not seen the cage or don't remember that far back, it is a previous mission where things got messed up. And it doesn't matter that it's one that we've heard of before, necessarily. But it's a nice little bit of texture to have that added anyway.
It sort of slots it into the history of Pike's captaincy.
Although it almost accomplishes the opposite of what Gene Roddenberry wanted to do in the cage. He wanted to present the idea of a continuing mission, and then we're just taken back to the only other mission prior to Discovery of Strange New Worlds that we know that Pike embarked on. It almost makes it smaller in a way. I did have one other thing as well. The Prime Directive. I like the approach of them treating it as a rule that can be interpreted rather than this dogmatic doctrine that the Berman era Star Trek ended up treating it as. Because it's a rule made by people and it doesn't apply in all situations. So Pike is interpreting it in a very specific way here. It's like, well, the asteroid wasn't supposed to be on the planet, so we're just fixing it. No breach there.
And it's now being known as the Prime Directive, right? But it was in episode 2 that it was finally called the Prime Directive, because before that it was
General Order 1. Yeah.
General Order 1, yeah. So now we're starting to get into like sort of Prime Directive discussion era, aren't we? Where they start to call it that. The other thing I noticed as well was that Pike deflects a phaser blast with a metal serving tray.
It was pretty fun,
but like, I mean, I don't understand phasers. I never have understood phasers. In all the years I've watched Star Trek, sometimes they seem to vaporize people, sometimes they seem to give people like life-threatening, terrible burns, and sometimes just like a smoky, I don't know, stain on someone's uniform. And sometimes they melt metal, sometimes they heat rocks, and sometimes they do absolutely nothing at all. And I don't understand, like, I just don't get it. What does a phaser do? And what settings, like...
It depends what setting you're on.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that we've moved away from beam phasers. That's something I really hate about the post-J.J. Abrams era of Star Trek, because it has to be projectile fire, because that's cooler, I guess, but I miss the beam phasers. You see them fired by the Enterprise in this episode, but...
Oh, so you mean phasers. like phaser like shots, phaser bullets, rather than...
Yeah.
Phaser beams, yeah.
I suppose it's a little easier to animate and potentially looks slightly less corny, but I understand the nostalgia, Craig.
It's probably harder to build a gunfight around a beam being fired rather than the burst fire that you get now, but I feel like they should take that as a challenge and they have to find a solution to that problem rather than just ignoring it and making the shootouts more generic that way.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one other thing I want to say before we sign off for the day is I want to give props to David Wynn, who played Zach. I wish we had gotten to see a little more of him because I thought his performance was interesting and compelling.
Yeah, I think he did a good job. He wasn't on screen for long, but I think he did a good job. Mm-hmm. I mean, he exhibited some very understandable emotions.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else before we wrap?
No, I think I've got it through my notes mostly.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right, guys. Well, I think that about does it for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 4, Among the Lotus Eaters. I just want to say thank you to our special guest, Clara Cook. Clara, can you give our listeners a chance to learn a little more about where they can get in touch with you and hear more about your work?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me, probably the best place to find me would be on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @ClaraJean and then MC. So @ClaraJeanMC. I run a podcast called The Tales We Tell, which is a podcast about women and gender in film, television, and fiction. And it's been on a bit of hiatus for the last few months, and for various different reasons, but I'm hoping to release some more episodes this summer. There is an episode on Captain Janeway there, if anyone's interested, with Una McCormack, who, you know, the Star Trek author, which Una is named after, I believe. So that's exciting. And yeah, I hope to someday produce more episodes on different female characters in Star Trek, because that's obviously one of my loves, is the different female characters in Star Trek. But yeah, we've got a whole back catalogue of episodes, so it's a tiny little indie pod. So feel free to go over and listen to some episodes if you have some spare time.
All right, Craig, where can folks connect with you online and hear more about your work?
Mostly I can be found on Kneel Before Blog, so that's kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. I review this, I review Superman and Lois, which will be finishing soon. I'll be reviewing the upcoming Secret Invasion, do film reviews as well, and there's an attached podcast called Kneel Before Pod, where I talk about nerdy stuff. So there's episodes on Spider-Verse and Guardians 3 and The Flash final season. I'm finally free. It's ready. It'll be out fairly soon. Or it might be out I hope it's out by the time you're listening to this. We're recording a few weeks before the air date. If I've not got it edited by then, there's something seriously wrong. But if you go onto Facebook and Twitter, type in Kneel Before Blog, you will find it there. And personally, I can be found under Nemesis4909 on Twitter, which didn't start life as a Star Trek reference. It was originally a Resident Evil reference, as is my mandate to say it on We Made This. That'll be my memory affirmation thing if I ever forget who I am. It'll be me reminding myself that Nemesis 4909 was originally a Resident Evil reference. That'll be the thing that keeps me going. So that's me.
Well, if you want to connect with me, guys, you can do that on Twitter. I'm @TheNerdyBlogger, like my Facebook page, facebook.com/TheNerdyBlogger. You can also follow me on Mastodon. I'm @TheNerdyBlogger @Mastodon.social. You can read my words on my blog, nerdyblogging.wordpress.com. You can also read them on fangirlish.com, where I write about film and television, mostly Star Trek. You can also hear my words being read on the Sci-Fi 5 podcast, which is 5 minutes of science fiction history 5 days a week. And you can hear me not only here on We Are Starfleet, but also on my Marvel podcast I co-host here on We Made This with Hugh McStay, called Podcast 616. Thank you all for joining us for another episode. And remember, We Are Starfleet is part of the We Made This podcast network. Please subscribe to We Are Starfleet and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help our network, please consider supporting us on Patreon. And you can do that at patreon.com/WeMadeThis. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is not all we're discussing, so we'll give you a taste of what you might have missed on the network in just a moment. Until next time, hit it.
Welcome to Make It So, a Star Trek Legacy podcast. Engage your warp cores and get ready to embark on a thrilling journey through the depths of the 24th and 25th centuries. Have some fun on the Cerritos. Join the Enterprise D crew. Take a trip with Star Trek Voyager. Take some lessons on the Protostar, or even relax on Deep Space Nine. With Make It So, we pay homage to the rich legacy of Star Trek, celebrating its enduring impact on popular culture and its profound influence on science fiction as a whole. We honour the vision of Gene Roddenberry and the countless writers, actors and creators who have brought this incredible universe to life. So join us as we navigate the cosmic expanse of the final frontier, engage in lively discussions, dissecting episodes, analysing characters, and sharing our love for everything Star Trek. Whether you are a lifelong fan or just beginning your voyage, this podcast is for you. It's time to embark on a journey where the stars are our guides, where the impossible becomes possible, and where the spirit of exploration knows no bounds. Welcome aboard, Make It So, the Star Trek Legacy podcast that will transport you to new frontiers and ignite your passion for the future. Make it so.